The moment the bottle of champagne exploded and flooded the screen in the break room, I realized that no one was going to pay me. Neither money, nor gratitude, nor ordinary respect. The system I wrote during sleepless nights showed results 4 times higher than planned. Everything worked perfectly. The service didn't crash, panels opened quickly, reports flew like electricity in a Tesla coil. The product lived, breathed, and was stable. This is a failure. It was me. People clapped. Marketing took a selfie. The sales department was handing out silly balloons. And I stood to the side, drinking warm soda and watching my work being shown off as if it were a toy for a corporate party. I wasn't angry, I was just tired. And then the manager came in with a perpetual grin and a cheap haircut. He patted me on the shoulder like a dog. Listen, you won't get a bonus. Company policy, you understand? I blinked. Policy? Yes, the higher-ups decided not to give bonuses after the launch, he said, and immediately moved on. Impersonal, huh? As if my nights with the base falling were impersonal. As if clause 13.2 in the contract I got was impersonal. As if the blood in my coffee mug isn't personal. I didn't say anything, I just nodded. Understood. But inside I realized something else. They thought I was replaceable, that the man who had built their entire system from the contractor's junk was just an expense. That I will swallow this. I returned to my desk. The noise in the room seemed to be muted. The mail was bursting with congratulations, and you can call urgently. Everyone wanted something. I gave everything, graphs, metrics, evidence, without emotion, without delay. But something clicked inside, not anger, not revenge, not yet, just a cold understanding. Their entire project only works because there's one line in the contract, a condition related to my work in the company. When Don dropped his no offense and walked away, he didn't just deprive me of my bonus, he pulled the pin on the grenade I had planted in the foundation of their system. All I had to do was wait for it to work. I didn't tell anyone, didn't go to HR, didn't write to the lawyers. I just opened my encrypted file, found the required def, highlighted the clause in the contract, and looked at it for a long time. I remember that meeting with Winder, how I had to fight for that line. Although actually, I shouldn't have been negotiating. Of course, Don screwed everything up, but I intervened. I spent 2 weeks arguing with Winder's lawyers to cover my bases in case they ever decided to screw me over like they did now. I went back to my email, sent 3 urgent reports, answered a couple of questions from the product, scheduled a meeting for Monday, smiled, waved to the intern, laughed at a joke I hadn't even heard. Then he opened a new letter to the lawyers. I wrote only 4 words in the topic: fui, potential, and soy. Monday morning smelled of stale donuts and denial. The confetti hasn't even been removed from the carpets in the hallway yet, and the emails are already starting to come out. Headlines like incredible teamwork and a historic victory. And in each one could feel the thick traces of top management. Everyone patted themselves on the back for my work. The official report came out around 10:6. A beautiful PDF with graphs I made. My colors, my metrics. The architecture is described on 2 pages, as if it were found in a field. They collected for 2 years my sleepless weekends, and nowhere. My name was not there. The authors include product lead and vice president of operations Eden, who once asked me, is Python a snake or a tongue? They signed a document that even contained my phrases from the SLC, word for word, and I turned into an anonymous contribution to the team. Not a human. List item. I didn't say a word, no sarcastic emojis, no condescending remarks. I simply opened a new folder and named it Insurance and started putting copies, correspondence, design drafts, and architectural diagrams with timestamps in there. Not out of anger, but out of preparation. War does not begin with a gun. It begins with the quiet ringing of a knife on a sharpener. By midday, rumors were circulating. One guy from Drops asked if the lawyers had checked the final clauses of the contract with Winder. There's something weird about the D-app, he said, sipping coffee from an Ord's Kiesener mug. I sat silently, filling out reports. The project manager waved it off. Probably the lawyers took a look. Everything is fine. I smiled faintly. A smile at the magician who hasn't yet realized that the rabbit is gnawing on his sleeve. I took lunch late, at 1:45 when the kitchen was empty. There was a dried-out chocolate cake on the table. It had success written on it in red icing. The letter looked like it had been drawn by a child in hysterics. It was just right that I sat by the window, didn't eat, just looked. HR was laughing with someone from sales. The product was already discussing plans for the fourth quarter, as if we hadn't been through a fire. Don walked by with coffee, talking loudly into his headset about centralizing insights. He didn't look at me. He shouldn't have. For them, I didn't exist outside of the code. But in the afternoon, I opened the license again. Not just the line I highlighted last week, but the entire document. Every page, every signature. I knew exactly what would happen if I had to use it. This won't just be a breach of contract, it will be a system blackout. What investors ask about on urgent calls is what compliance officials later call irreparable risk. I haven't needed to hit yet. All that was needed was to wait, to let the silence stretch. Let Don forget what he had skimmed over. Let the bosses trample on my back a little longer. Let the rope be tightened, because the moment they did everything officially without payment, without mention, erasing me, my trap was triggered. At 6 p.m., I left exactly on schedule, not a minute later. It's like an ordinary day. The only thing I had in my bag was a hard drive, encrypted with timestamps and a full backup of the entire system. When everything collapses, they will need a miracle. And I have already decided that I will not be in this building when they beg for help. The license was in a folder that no one remembered anymore. Even the purchasing department. A file with such a boring name that anyone would immediately scroll past it. Yankee 34 license, final, executed, v7.def. It was there from the day it was signed, like a loaded weapon in a box. Nobody thought I would use it. And I remembered. Damn, I remembered every line. It was Wednesday, still riding the euphoria of the launch, the caffeine and the smugness. Khan had already called the system our child in meetings, as if he'd done more than 5 SLC approvals and 1 lunch where he'd asked about the details of expansion, monetization, and the roadmap. Everything is on the platform that I built, and still no payment. I opened the file. The clause was exactly where I remembered it. Appendix D, subsection 3 paragraph B 1 sentence. If the appointed technical manager is CM, BT application my name is excluded from the paid staff for more than 72 hours. This license agreement is considered invalid. All access rights are revoked without notice. No gray areas. Black and white switch. This line did not appear by chance. 2 years ago, Don and his friends tried to give the project to a contractor from Austin, the same 10th ex-engineer who boasted about his speed and didn't write documentation. I accidentally saw the correspondence in SLK. They wrote there that I defend the system too much, argue too much, and that my salary is an unnecessary expense. Did you want to throw me out? Then I called Wender. I explained the situation and asked to spell out the conditions more strictly. I got my name included in the contract. Do you want to use the software? This means that I should not only be on staff, but also receive a salary. I made it so that it would be impossible to erase me quietly. And now they're standing with both feet on this legal landmine. I rolled up the window, took a sip of coffee, and opened the doorbell. Created a new letter to the lawyers. No emotion, no threats, just 4 lines. Subject: FWE potential issue. Hello, kid. I'm reaching out to you regarding the analytics license. Specifically Appendix D. There may be issues with Complos if the current payment structure doesn't match the terms. Attached for verification. The contract is attached. Def original with signatures and dates. Let the document speak for itself. I click send. No drama, no sirens, no explosions. But the moment I clicked on the paper airplane icon, the game changed completely because it was no longer about feelings. It wasn't about justice or recognition. It was about the law, about management, about how quickly a company can fall apart if the only person who actually read the contract stops protecting them from their own laziness. I didn't wait for a read receipt, and I didn't refresh my email while waiting for a response. I just leaned back in my chair, stretched my neck, and listened to the hum of the servers still feeding on my code. Let them pretend I'm not here. But now every breath the system took was illegal, and only I could give it back its right to live. The first signal was silence. Unusual, but so special, created on purpose. On Thursday morning, the lawyers wrote to Don. I know because Ribaioka, our chief legal officer, CC'd me on the email. Polite request. Clarify license details. Concerning the D application. Everything is cold and precise, like a surgeon sharpening a scalpel. Don didn't answer, neither immediately nor after a follow-up email, where the kid gently reminded him, "We want to confirm that the current reward complies with the license terms." He hasn't read for 6 hours, and I've watched his Slack status fluctuate between online and on-demand. The green dot blinked like a pulse. Then something strange happened. I was kicked out of the data ops channel. No warning, no explanation, just bang, and that's it. Just a second ago, I was reading a discussion about the integration of new endpoints, and then I saw the message. You no longer have access. It was like I was kicked off the island. The same thing with meeting with Tendup. The invitation disappeared from the calendar. I realized this when I saw a notification about a faucet sharing from the OO mom room where I was supposed to be. It blinked and disappeared. They were squeezing me out. Don probably thought he was being strategic, controlling the consequences, hiding the problem, and restructuring the process without making a fuss. Maybe he was counting on me getting tired, giving up, and quietly going into the HR archives like many before me. But instead, I opened a new spreadsheet and called it Critical Analytics Dependencies version 3.6 and started recording everything. Daily sales dashboards, churn reports for the board, my Python scripts, transaction monitoring through my Kafka flows, predictive models for CFO calls, warehouse transformations I ran as a cron job during a snowstorm while Don sat at home with glitchy Wi-Fi. By lunchtime, I had 43 systems tied to my code. By the end of the day, 68. Midnight 92. Each description has a timestamp, owner, and conditions of refusal. The last column is the point of failure without a license. Spoiler: most will collapse within 72 hours of the first vendor check. Don's bet was not only arrogant, it was deadly. And still silence. No response to lawyers, no attempt to correct course, only soft isolation. They thought I would go away quietly, that I had no evidence, that I was not vindictive enough, strong enough, or legally protected enough to pull the trigger. But they didn't know. I built this trigger, I did the wiring, I wrote the line in the contract. I didn't need to shout, I didn't need to burst into the meeting room with a folder and an insult. All we had to do was wait. On Friday morning, I exported the Bicep logs, saved the dependency maps, and encrypted everything using a key that was stored on an offline disk. I didn't need revenge, I needed proof. If they came crawling to beg, I wanted to have a right to say no. If they attacked, I wanted to be able to destroy them in 3 clicks. The fire hadn't touched them yet, but smoke was already coming through the ventilation. This meeting was not on anyone's calendar. No email subject, no documents, no Slack messages. Just be quiet and get away from the lawyers. Rebecca gathered people in the conference room as if she were gathering a jury before the verdict. Inside is Don, red and bored. Someone from HR, chewing gum like a schoolgirl at recess. A financier, fresh out of university, clearly dreaming of being anywhere but here. Rebecca sat at the head of the table, opened her laptop, and steepled her fingers as if she were praying or preparing to send someone to hell. Of course, I was uninvited, but I didn't need to be. I already knew what file was open on her screen. Appendix D, that same loop. Rebecca dug deep as only lawyers with good intuition and bad sleep can. She read the contract. I actually read it, and I understood what Don didn't understand. A license is informal. This is a living contract, the heart of the system, and the heart was me. I want to clarify something. She began calmly, in the voice of a sapper cutting a wire. My name is currently paid in accordance with the employment contract. HR responded first. Easy, as if it were a simple question. Yes, sure. She's an active employee, not fired. The child didn't even blink. That's not what I asked. I asked if she was paid. Pause. The financier flips through the table and frowns. Her second quarter bonus is still pending. There is no payment yet. Don jumped in too quickly with joy. We are still evaluating performance indicators after the launch. The team certainly did a great job, but there are issues at the bonus policy level. Rebecca raised her hand. Calmly, clearly. Then she closed the laptop. Not with a bang, Not with anger, just quietly like a coffin lid. She looked straight at them. If she wasn't paid for this violation, HR would blink. Violation of what? Rebecca nodded towards the closed laptop. Clause 13.2. Section D is a license agreement that gives us access to 97% of the entire analytics infrastructure. It states that our name must be on the list of paid employees, otherwise the license is invalid. Don't try to laugh. Yes, it's just a simple formality. No, the child answered so quietly that the air in the room grew cold. Informality. Everyone fell silent. Rebecca leaned forward. If this is not corrected, we are outlaws. This means that all access to the system is illegal. Every dashboard, every report, every call to investors using this data is a risk. So she turned to Dawn. You will have to explain why you did not process the payment under the clause that contains the conditions for the actual system shutdown. Dawn looked like a man who had just realized that instead of a parachute, he had a duffel bag on his back. I didn't know, he muttered. Did you know? The child answered calmly. You signed a payment deferral form. You approved the freeze. The young financier coughed. We thought it was standard. Nobody spoke. This is unconventional. The child cut him off abruptly. It was negligence. The silence is long and heavy. Then she stood up. I will raise the issue to the director's level, she said. If she doesn't get paid by the end of the day, we'll be in breach of contract. And if this happens, I am obliged to report it to our external lawyer and the supplier's due diligence team. She walked towards the door, stopped, and added without turning around. If you think she's bluffing, read the contract again. She wrote most of it herself. Someone walked past the glass with a flashing monitor. Life went on outside, but inside the room a fire started. They just haven't realized yet that the floor is already on fire. It all started with a missed letter. 3:12 a.m. The automated global sales report did not reach the CFO's inbox. No error, no return, just emptiness. At 3:34, an intern from the East Coast wrote into the chat in a panic. Hey, the dashboards aren't working, or I'm being stupid. By 4 a.m., the DevOps chat had become a battlefield. Nobody could access analytics. The logs were clean. There were no new releases, no crashes either. But the API keys were returning error 4003 from the provider. And then a message came, not from me, not from the lawyers, but from the system itself. Every report, every guide, every dashboard, everything showed the red banner. License not recognized. Contact the account owner. There it was, the very same condition from DZAP that was now giving them the middle finger because they hadn't paid me. By 6:45, Don's voicemail inbox and probably his soul were full. People crowded around his door like children around a burning house. I was sitting in the break room, my feet on the desk, drinking bitter office coffee from an old mug that said data never sleeps. Ironic. I didn't gloat, I didn't even smile. I just sat quietly like a ghost in the car. By 7:30 a.m. the matter had reached the lawyers. Lawyers before children. She didn't write to me, and there was no need. At 8:02, I saw her at the director's office. He held a black folder in his hands. His face is pale but calm. She spoke quietly and quickly. The director first looked confused, then worried, then serious. An emergency meeting was called for 8:15. Neither deputy nor calendar, only in person. The subject of the email contained one word, urgent. I wasn't invited again, but it didn't matter anymore. My name was already in the room. Don tried to wriggle out of it. Of course, he said that it was a technical failure, an error on the supplier's side. Rebecca put the contract on the table. Clause 13.2, subparagraph D. Termination of the license if the appointed technical specialist is not paid. The room fell silent. This is true? Asked the director. The child nodded. She still receives a salary. The finance department shook its head. Don tried to say something. He was brushed aside like a mosquito, and I was sitting in the break room, drinking coffee and watching someone from marketing quietly cry into his granola. A new notification appeared on the screens. Pipeline has been suspended due to a license violation. Panic spread through the office. It wasn't a tank, it was a law. It was a vulnerability. They could have fired me, of course, but they would no longer have been able to run the company after that. I opened my laptop, refreshed the page, and watched as their world froze right before my eyes. Then I finished my coffee. It tasted better than usual. The room was full of people, but no one was breathing. Never before has a child opened a black folder. Never clicked a pen. This sound was always like a warning shot. And not even when she pronounced the names of the points. It sounded like a priest reading a prayer before an execution. Appendix D, paragraph 13.2, subparagraph D, she said, looking at the paper but speaking directly to Dawn. Termination of contract if technical manager does not receive payment. The room was dark. The projector was turned off. The curtains were closed. No graphs, no presentations, just paper on the table and the frantic pulse of 5 executives who realized they had stepped on a mine. Rebecca looked up, calm as a storm that had already passed. "Tell me, did you pay her?" she asked, looking at Don as if she had a knife to his throat. Is she on staff?" He hesitated. "That's not what I asked." She interrupted the child in a voice as cold as ice. "I asked if they had paid her the money." There was a long pause. Finally, the young financier from the corner muttered, "Her second quarter bonus has been delayed. Still under internal review." Rebecca blinked once, closed the folder with the precise movement of a surgeon, and immediately opened it again to another page, highlighted and underlined. "I advise you to call investors immediately," she said. Silence exploded in the room. The CFO turned pale. The VP of sales rubbed his temples as if trying to push the consequences out of his head. The CEO didn't move or blink, staring at the paper as if it might catch fire on its own. Don tried to laugh. "Well, this is just lawyers going too far, right? Such clauses are almost never applied. They are used," she interrupted the child. The supplier confirmed, "I contacted their compliance department this morning. They checked her status against her system access. If she's not getting paid, we're operating without a license. There should be a grace period," Don began hesitantly. "No," she answered calmly, turning the page. 72 hours. They ended yesterday at 2,343 minutes. Silence again, now even heavier. Rebecca stood up, straightened her jacket, looked straight at the CEO, but not at Dawn. "I strongly recommend that she be compensated immediately and retroactively, and that notices be prepared for the board and investors. The breach affects not only the work, but also all reports built on this data." Sayo exhaled heavily through his nose. "Is there any way to fix this?" The child did not answer immediately. She just looked at him, then said, "There was a chance, but you decided her bonus wasn't worth the exception." Don's hand shook as he reached for the bottle of water. "I didn't know," he muttered. "Have you signed a contract?" The child answered calmly, already heading towards a door. And she checked that box twice. At that moment, everyone understood that this was not a mistake. This was not an accident. It's a system created by a man they thought was unnecessary. A system cemented by a point that none of them read because it wasn't on the pretty slides. Rebecca stopped at the door. "I'll prepare a notice," she said. "Let me know if you want me to put your names." With these words, the child left. Without the sound of a hammer, without smoke, only the truth settling in the room like dust. Inside, no one moved. Outside, the platform was silent. The panels were empty. There were no numbers. You can't hide the facts. And I stood in the hallway, leaning against the soda machine, and watched as the people who considered me a nobody lost their ground. No smile, no gloating, just silence. Let them feel it. By midday, the building resembled a funeral parlor. Phones rang, but no one answered. Slack had turned into a cemetery. Unanswered questions. Dead chats. The CEO's assistant ran past my desk 3 times in 15 minutes with a laptop and a half-eaten banana, repeating, oh my God," like a prayer. The collapse began. Access to investor panels closed. Customer analytics disappeared. Reports, according to forecasts, pulled up data so old that it still listed the discontinued product. People rebooted their routers, hoping that would bring the system back to life. Marketing blamed IT. IT blamed vendor. Windows responded with one stern line. "Your license is invalid due to violation. Contact the responsible account manager." I was the account manager, but I didn't look at the chaos with the popcorn. I was already writing scripts for a new freelance project. that I was paid in crypto and respect. A better deal than everything that was here. Around 12:40, a guy from HR, and in turn, Tyler, came up to me with deodorant stains under his arms and eyes full of fear. In his hands was a printed form, like a hostage note. Hey, Alden wanted to ask, maybe you could help put together some type documentation for the transition? He muttered. His voice broke. I looked up. Documentation for a system to which I no longer have legal access. I clarified. Tyler blushed. Well, yeah, just so the team can continue working. I took a slow sip of tea and calmly replied. Tell Alden I'm unavailable, and next time don't send someone who doesn't understand what the word violation. Tyler nodded too quickly, as if his head wanted to flee the room before his body, and left silently. I returned to the terminal and deleted my personal accounts from all test environments, not out of anger, but out of a sense of accomplishment. Meanwhile, HR resorted to trickery. They tried to retroactively pay out the bonus. They didn't even try to hide the fact that the system had a 1:14 a.m. stamp, well after the contractual deadline. The payment was marked as a manual adjustment at discretion. They thought they could put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound and call it compliance. Rebecca wouldn't allow it. She sent a company-wide letter, short, stern, and unequivocal. A delayed payment does not correct the violation. According to Clause 13.2d, the logs confirm the violation. The platform remains unlicensed. Disclosure of information to the vendor and investors continues, in black and white, without embellishment. And still, Don tried to blame it all on an internal error. I heard him telling the finance lady in the hallway that the child could have contacted me directly, not through lawyers, as if I hadn't written to him twice. And the first letter was marked. Fui, a possible problem. The stupidity didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how stubbornly they clung to it. They had a meteor on the horizon, flying straight into the quarterly report, and their plan was to slip me a Worth template and hope that I would help. But I wasn't playing their game anymore. There wasn't even work to do. At 2 p.m., I was passing the conference room. Panic inside. For people on the phone, one crying, another running back and forth. Don was waving his hands over a spreadsheet where there were only errors instead of numbers. I didn't slow down, didn't look, just smiled slightly, looking at the chocolate machine. Tuix was out, but he was still more reliable than their management. The call came at 6:42 p.m. I was just poured himself some wine and fed the cat. On the screen was a number without a signature, without assistants, without secretaries. This could mean only one thing. I picked up the phone and said one word. Yes. There was a pause. I could hear his breathing. Then his voice was hoarse, stifled. What do you need? No greeting, no unnecessary words. The CEO himself is not an assistant, not a PR person. I sat down at the table and opened the folder titled They Will Beg. There was a PDF that my lawyer had prepared 2 weeks ago for the proposal to restore and buy out the license in case of a violation. We had foreseen this even before the launch, before Don decided to be smart, before he decided that politics is more important than people. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch taut. Then I hit forward. Subject line, your 24-hour window. The document had 3 points. Immediate transfer of the entire debt plus a 40% penalty for violation. Buy out the license for a 6-figure sum through outside lawyers. A written admission of my contribution, which will be read out at the company's general meeting. I heard him open the file. Felt the moment the numbers hit him in the eye. 10 seconds of silence. Then quiet. I should have just paid you that damn bonus. I didn't say it. I told you so. I didn't laugh. I didn't throw confetti. Just calm down. You have until the end of the working day tomorrow. Then Winder will receive a violation notification. Click. No bite. No drama. I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of wine, and waited for the transfer to be confirmed. The panels remained dark all night. The board of directors still hadn't received the third quarter report. Investors refreshed the pages and saw only error 4.2. License authorization required. And I watered the flowers, watched the sunset, felt the silence. That golden silence, when the system you created speaks louder than any words. They had violated more than just the contract. They had proven that everything rested on me, and now they were paying according to my rules.